Hello and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a good day so far, or had a good day depending on what time it is. And today I wanted to show basically how I put my foils, get them to stick to my pieces using UV resin. So before, if you watched my QR code videos or any videos showing my foils, I would dome my whole piece and then put a foil in and try to move it around and then wait for it to cure, for it to basically be on the piece, stuck to the piece. But I recently realized there's a way easier way to do that. So before even doming it, I can put a bit of UV resin on the piece, stick the foil down on the piece. I can already have the foil stuck in that location, so I don't have to worry about the resin moving the foil around or it looking a certain way after it cures with epoxy resin. Because with UV resin, you could just take a UV lamp or flashlight and automatically cure it already in that place. When it comes to working with UV resin, just like epoxy resin, you want to make sure that you put on gloves and that you put on the mask and that you're in a well-ventilated space, just because it does still produce those odors and you don't want to breathe it in. Like right here on this UV resin bottle, it says resin will give out odor and heat during curing under the conditions of ventilation and use. It says wearing gloves and glasses while using is recommended. So just make sure that you are practicing the same safety that you do when it comes to epoxy resin. I'm going to go ahead and put my mask on, so I'm going to sound a bit different. And how I'm going to be showing you how I cure my UV resin when I put it in, I'm going to be using a flashlight, but again, you can use either their lamp or you can use sunlight as well. Sunlight does cure UV resin pretty fast. So if it's like a sunny day, then it'll cure, but I recommend using the flashlight to get it to cure in place. And then if I need to cure it any further, I will put it under the lamp. Alright, so I'm going to show you basically 3 different pieces that I'm going to be putting the UV resin on, or using the UV resin to get the foils to stick. I have the back of this trinket tray, which I'm going to be putting my logo on the back. I have this trinket bowl, going to be putting one of those Halloween foils in the middle. I have this coaster, same thing, going to be putting one of the Halloween foils. And for the coaster, it's going to be actually using 3 different foils, so that's going to be a little interesting to do there. Let's go ahead and start with this trinket bowl here. And first you want to make sure you have it faced up the way you want it to be with the foil in it. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the foil, see how I want it to be. I think I like it like that. I'm going to want it centered like that. So you can take the foil off, get your UV resin, put a good amount so that when the foil is in it, that it'll get covered like that. You want to put the foil on there. You take a popsicle stick, push it down to make sure the piece gets covered. And just when epoxy resin, you want to make sure that you're being careful with pushing it down. You want to make sure that your piece or your foil is not getting scratched. You want to get any of those bubbles from under there as well. And see, with the sunlight, my piece is actually already cured because I'm doing it right in front of my window. Thankfully, it's in a spot that is actually fine with it. So if you were doing it and you're not doing it in front of your window like me and it's not cured yet, then you just take your flashlight, go over it when it's in a good spot that you like, and make sure it gets all cured. The amount of time it takes to cure depends on how much UV resin you use and I guess how big the area is. So just keep that in mind. Okay, we got our first foil cured on there. Now we're going to do this one. We're going to be putting my logo foil on the back of this one. And if you have issues with it curing too fast, you can always put something to block it. That way nothing's like shining down on that area. Try to get it in the middle as much as you can. And I always struggle with this, so thankfully doing it with UV resin is a lot better than the epoxy, because you can kind of keep moving around and seeing, and then after it's cured it stays like that. I think that actually might be good enough, so I'm going to go ahead and take my flashlight, start curing it, and like that, after a few minutes it is no longer moving. Can't do anything to it. So it doesn't matter so much if they're overspilled UV resin, because you're going to be covering it at the end with epoxy resin, so all this will be covered up and it'll be all glossy and clear. You won't even tell that there was UV resin here. I think what's most important is making sure there's not too little UV resin, especially for bigger pieces or bigger foils like this, because then you'll have like bubbles that can trap inside of it, or like areas that you can tell that it's missing like resin or like coverage there. So just something to keep in mind for that. So lastly, we're going to be putting the foils on this one. Now I'm not too sure how I want to do this one. I think I like it like that, like the eyes are staring at the person, the hands are covering her face and starting to go for her eyes, and it says shush. I think that looks good. And try to keep them in that corner there. And then time for the last piece, which is a bit bigger, so we're going to add some all around here to make sure that it spreads. I think that actually looks good. So this is already curing, or already cured again, just from it simply being in the sunlight there. Same with this over here, and this is slowly already curing as well, which it makes it nice. It's fast turnaround when working with UV resin. You do only get a little bit, so I wouldn't recommend doming your piece with UV resin. It saves more money if you use epoxy resin. You can use a lot of it over a bunch of pieces instead of having to work fast and having to buy a lot of UV resin. But yeah, they're all cured. If it's not cured for you, of course you can use your flashlight, UV flashlight, or you can use your lamp. And basically I'm going to be doming these again with epoxy resin. I use Eliminate's Amazing Clear Class, but you can use any epoxy resin that you may have, and I just go around and I dome it, and it all just gets in there nicely. You would have never known that I use UV resin. And if you are curious about doming or using epoxy resin, I have a few other videos that I show how I dome my pieces, so you can be sure to check those out. I don't think I ever made like an official doming video, but in some of my tutorial videos I have shown me doming my piece. I figured I'd give you a different angle and better look. You can see the UV resin used there and on this piece. Overall, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it taught you something. Maybe it opened your eyes to using UV resin to get your foils to stick to your piece, because foils are on transparent sheets. They're just this film. They're not stickers, they're not decals, so you have to get them to stick on with either epoxy resin or UV resin. And sticking it on with UV resin is just so much easier than trying to get it to stay in the piece centered how you want it with epoxy resin. Of course, you still need to make sure you dome your piece afterwards, or it will just look like this and it won't be secured. This isn't covered in any type of resin, so any scratches will take this foil off. So you really want to make sure that you do dome your piece afterwards. Whether you want to use UV resin or epoxy resin, I do recommend epoxy resin to do it. But yeah, let me know in the comments if you have any questions about doming or about using UV resin foils, anything really, and I'll be sure to get to you as soon as I can. thank you so much just for watching my video and sticking with me. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.